On this episode of the Pilot Adventure, Tom passes out, there's a dude with a man bun, and American Airlines drives everyone to drink. Today, Tom and I are heading to Las Vegas, picking up a 2007 Cirrus SR22 Turbo. I've spent months researching planes, looking for something to upgrade my 1974 Piper Warrior. I trained VFR, IFR, even started my commercial in this plane. Had about 400 hours in it, but it's time for something faster, and plus my wife approved, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up the Cirrus before she changes her mind. Now, a lot of people ask me, why did you become a pilot? Consider this. What single thing can you do that can improve your life and enhance your freedom? Flying. Plus, I hate sitting in traffic, and there's plenty of that in the New York area. In the early days of aviation, flying commercial was a luxurious, enjoyable experience. Not so much anymore. Between the traffic, the TSA, and delays, flying commercial sucks. Tom agrees.
It's 8:20 right now, so we'll see at 8:40. Commercial flights. Since we actually boarded at 6:30.
Well, the pilot is about to tell you, we've been sitting here for 3 hours. We have the option to leave the plane if we want, but if we do, we can't get back on. Now that's customer service. Thanks, American Airlines.
Got back on. We'll be doing the jumper drop hopefully in the next 5 minutes.
Now, despite the 5-hour delay, I have to admit, I'm still pretty excited to go pick up this new Cirrus. Not everyone was excited, though. Some of the passengers are starting to get pretty restless. Some even started drinking. Heavily. Especially this guy. And only 15 short hours later, Vegas. Now, most guys go to Vegas to gamble or to go to strip clubs. We were discussing the finer points of hypoxia. Well, it's 3 a.m. We have just a few short hours to finalize our flight plan and get ready for the 8-hour, 2,000-mile flight back to New York. We're going to be flying through mountains at high altitude and on oxygen. A lot of preparation goes into a flight like this, and you have to be well rested and ready to go.
Christmas comes early today. Brian's first time seeing his brand new plane. Oh, look at that. Isn't that something? Beautiful paint job.
Yeah. You're gonna be spoiled, right?
What do you think? Are you stoked?
I don't like it. Let's take it back. Yeah. Now, when you fly a new plane for the first time, it's going to take some getting used to. For example, figuring out which key I should be using.
Key fail.
Yeah, I already failed the check ride. There it is. Okay. Clear left and right.
Now, here's a pro tip. When you're leaning the engine on the ground, don't lean too much, or this'll happen.
You want one more? That was a little bit too much lean.
Alright.
As soon as you feel it dying, right away, like, put it back so it doesn't die.
Alright.
That's nice.
Success. Time to taxi, get our clearance, and head for Aspen. Now, before today's flight, I have about 20 hours of training in a normally aspirated SR22. The turbo's a little different. You can actually produce over 100% power on the takeoff roll if you're not careful. You have to watch the manifold pressure, making sure you're not overboosting the engine. This plane will quickly accelerate to 80 knots, rotate, and you can climb all the way up to 25,000 feet at about 1,500 feet a minute. The turbo is capable of producing sea-level pressure within the engine, so you don't lose any climb performance, even at high altitudes where the air is thin. I highly recommend testing one out. this is going to be a pretty action-packed flight. This is some of my first experience with mountain flying, high altitude flying, and flying with oxygen. I'm in good hands though. Tom's a CFII, and he's taken his Cirrus all over South America. In about 10 minutes, we climbed through a cloud layer. Now, IFR in the mountains is something entirely different than IFR at sea level. You better know your minimum en route altitudes.
We just landed in Aspen. It's cold, but there's no snow.
Now, aviation has taken me to some pretty cool places, but I have never seen this many private jets lined up in one place, Aspen. After a bite to eat, top off on the fuel tanks, and a refill of the oxygen, we are on our way. Now here we really get to test the turbo capability. I have never taken off from an airport that's 8,000 feet above sea level, but it was no problem for the turbo. Here's where the flight got really interesting. It was time to learn how to fly through some mountain valleys. Momentarily, you're going to hear the terrain warning system come on. First, it was scary, but I'm glad to have had the experience. I may have wet myself slightly during that last segment. It's okay though, we're almost through the Rockies headed for America's heartland. Nice and flat and low. Let's take a moment to talk through this plane's equipment list. We have two Garmin GTN 650 WAS receivers, a GTX 345 with ADS-B in and out, and the Avidyne Integra system. All combined give you really good situational awareness. We're also flying with the Bose A20 noise cancelling headsets, an absolute dream to fly with after 8 hours. You barely notice them. Before I bought this Cirrus, a number of pilot friends told me not to buy a turbo. They tried to tell me that a normally aspirated plane was just as good, but here we are climbing through 15,300 feet at almost 120 knots true airspeed, close to 1,000 feet a minute. That's pretty amazing. Normally aspirated plane can't do that. Now's a good time to review the supplemental oxygen rules. At cabin pressures above 14,000 feet MSL, the minimum flight crew is provided with and uses supplemental oxygen during the entire flight time at those altitudes. And at cabin pressures above 15,000 feet MSL, each occupant of the aircraft is provided with supplemental oxygen. Here's what happens when you don't use it. Well, about 8.5 hours and 2,000 miles later, we're back in New York. We hit a top speed over ground of 277 knots, and that alone was enough to convince Tom to upgrade to a turbo. On the next episode of the Pilot Adventure, we're heading to the Bahamas. We're going to pick up 3 rescue dogs and bring them back to their new homes in the U.S. Now at this point, you're probably saying, oh look, some cute puppies. But there's a bit more to this story. Someone tried to set their litter on fire. Well, that's it from the Pilot Adventure. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.